In 2018, we had officially moved into our small farmhouse on a pretty ran-down land that we ended up restoring over the course of a 6-year period. In this video, I'm going to break down just about everything that happened in those 6 years in a small little bite-sized video. Anyways, be sure to enjoy, and let's go. Now, sometime in mid-August 2018 was when we finally settled down in the new place, and unfortunately on that very same week I got pretty sick, which was about 1 week before school began, and I did a little bit of research, and actually getting sick after moving in is a fairly common thing, mainly due to dust and other particles that you're not quite used to, but as you get used to it, you begin to feel better and better. I did feel a lot better the second I went back outside, but when I went back inside I felt a little bit worse, which is probably a reason that something inside the house was causing it that I hadn't quite yet gotten used to. During this year, we also began cutting down some of the fields in the back. That was because the fields in the back really needed to be trimmed back. They were really overgrown, as I said in the intro. The farm definitely wasn't kept at the best thing, which is why they probably put it for sale. But of course, the first procedure to restoring the farmhouse was to get everything in the back ready. Trimming the fields with a brush hog and a simple tractor is everything we would possibly need to be able to build a simple yet sustainable farm in the background. Before we could get any livestock, that's all we needed to do, was just trim the fields, and it took us for the rest of 2018 to get the fields in a stable condition. But then the winter struck, and in late November 2018, we got an 8-inch snowstorm. I'm not joking. In November, we don't even get snow, but like 8 inches in November is pretty crazy. But either way, still, it was a crazy 2018 to end out the season, and nothing really crazy ended out the year, other than the fact that the field began growing back a little bit, so we had to trim it consistently. Now, 2019 was more or less just getting ready for everything that was to come in the following and preceding years. During the course of this year, we obviously settled down with a couple new things that we decided to do. The winter was pretty hectic and absolutely an awful winter with snow accumulating, and then it iced on top of that, so there was nothing you could really do during the winter but slip and hope and pray that your head does not suffer serious injury while you're sledding on the snow, and hope that you don't get impaled by a stationary fence post that wouldn't be so stationary after that. But in the summer of 2019, we finally got around to tearing down an old rusty shed in the background. The shed is not the one you'll sometimes see in the far background. That one was coming in 2021, but there was a smaller shed that was coming later this year that replaced this really tiny one that was around 3 foot by 3 foot and a really tiny shed for no particular reason, and I still don't even know where that thing came from, other than the fact that it's really bad, and there was even a groundhog hole inside of it. We tore it down in one day. That's how horrible it was. And after that, we began planning out for a bigger shed in the back of the farm, and we began building the small 9 by 10 shed with 2 floors on it, with 1.5 floors on it. We still haven't even gotten around to finish the second floor, but we built the basic framing, added a roof, and made it so that way you can now store stuff in there and at a moment's notice. So it's really simple, and it's really, really, really helpful. Yes, 2020, truly a year that we all remember for the wrong reasons, and I'm not going to get into any of those reasons in this video because this is a farmhouse video, not a news story. Anyways, let's talk about what happened during this year. So obviously during the first portion of the year, we began planning out what we were going to do for the remainder of the year, which we wanted to get chickens and begin actually building some things this year. In the first portion of the year, nothing really big happened until the very great day of March 3rd, 2020, when we were announced that we were going to get chickens and they were going to be picked up on the day of March 20th, 2020. We began driving down there on March 20th, 2020 and picked up the chickens. I still remember that night that we brought them home and I was worried one of them would die. But fortunately, all 9 of them ended up surviving. And also during this year, we lost our first chicken, Candlewick, on June 29th, 2020. During this year, we, of course, began building the shed, the big barn that's outside, and it stores a whole lot more stuff. It's mainly for that and also for other farm purposes. There'll be more coming in the future, and trust me, more of a building video might be coming if some things turn out right this year, unlike last year. But of course, preceding that, we began laying out the foundation, getting through all the necessary processes before obviously laying out the foundation and building all that stuff and covering it up, because the early winter of 2020 and 21 would be crazy. 2021 was a year where everything began unfolding in the right way, obviously. To start out the year, the snow began falling, which was something that still hasn't been seen to this day in crazy amounts. And then we still have the fact that the barn hasn't yet been completed, and we were wondering when the people would come up and take care of building the barn. Fortunately, they came up sometime in March, I don't remember, and the barn was finally completed. Obviously, it wasn't insulated, and that would be a project we'd do in 2023. But during this year, we also got our original farm flock, where only a couple of those chickens still remain. I believe like 2 or 3 of them from the original batch. I remember PETA, and I think someone else in the pet flock is from that original batch. I think a couple are, actually. I think 4 of the 5 of them are actually from the original batch. But that's pretty much all I remember from that. And also during this year, we began work on the fence, which still hasn't quite yet been completed as more projects came up along the way, because the driveway, which was done by the people who were building the barn, unfortunately got washed out during the course of summer 2021, which meant more projects that we had to do to restore that. But by this time, the fields were really well maintained, but unfortunately they had developed a very, very common trait of a farm called horse nettle, the worst plant, and if you see them, your farm is pretty much screwed unless you get some pesticides and stuff like that. During 2021 was also when I started my channel to document things that were going on around the farm. In the year of 2022, some crazy things began unfolding, and let me explain all of them. So, in the first portion of 2022, we had to deal with multiple small-scale winter storms. One of them that was saying we could get 3 feet of snow, we got like 12 inches, which I mean was cool and all. I didn't even know what was going to happen with that one anyway. Going on, we unfortunately lost our first chicken since 2020, Sprinkles, on the 29th of May of that year. Preceding that, in the summer, we began doing a hatching chickens project, and also, I forgot to say, but gardening was a big part of the farm. And that this year, it was bigger than ever, as I only recorded 1 garden tour in 2021. But yet in 2022, that was when I began recording garden tours just about weekly, because I was so excited to share brand new information I was dropping about the garden. And oh, trust me, it was some of the craziest information you've ever heard. Tomato plants have grown 3 inches. There's more tomatoes on there. And I documented just about everything that happened in the garden, with gardening being a greater portion of the summer of 2022. I messed that one up horribly on my part, okay? Don't blame me. And then we did a hatching project, and then the pool build came in September and October, which left a massive mound of dirt in the yard that chickens enjoyed, even until we tore it down in 2023, because it was becoming sort of just a weed host. All the weeds that wanted to grow in there just began growing, and it was so annoying. Now, 2023 had a lot of really small-scale projects, but mainly the main course of the year was learning from mistakes. For, of course, a greater portion of the year. The first part of the year was fairly sedate, with only losing Chicken Burger, which was a huge loss considering it was our first predatory loss in the pet flock for numerous years. Then on June 10th, Lovey unfortunately passed away due to a red-tailed hawk attack, which made me think something was going on in the pet flock. And after that, the floodgates went loose. But fortunately, at this point, everything had began changing. The garden was growing, we were getting substantial harvest. But then on July 20th, 2023, unfortunately, a lot of the pet flock and the farm flock was wiped out by a weird animal, which was quite unfortunate. I would assume it's a massive coyote due to what's been seen on the trail cameras. This event unfortunately took the lives of Grey Cloud, BCT, What the Cluck, and what was that other chicken? Mrs. Peepers. Those were all the chickens that had unfortunately passed away due to this unfortunate chain of events. And then the farm flock finally moved outside, and we got new farm flock chickens on August 23rd, 2023. The only reason I remember that date was because that was the day before the first day of school, which was August 24th for me. Now, of course, preceding that, the farm flock outside began to convert into idiot chickens like they do for their first year. They laid their first egg in September, and we also did meat chickens earlier on in the season. The gardening season was well documented this year, with many video essays and documentaries dropping about the gardening process as a whole. And in the fall, channel quality improved a whole lot. Everything began improving in the fall. And of course, one thing that definitely improved a whole lot in the fall was the security for the farm flock. They kept getting out, so we installed a massive fence. They still get out because of the way the gate is shaped, but that'll be changing in a moment's notice. And that leads us to 2024. So far, nothing crazy has happened this year, but we're going to begin renovating our upstairs in this house, as it has unfortunately been damaged by some certain events I won't be listing for the sake of this video back in the year 1977. Anyways, that's it. Be sure to click the video on the screen before the video ends. It's a whole playlist of these video essays just like this one. There's many of them, I believe like 20 or something like that. Anyways, I'm out. Subscribe.